Everybody, welcome back to another episode of One of These Years. I'm, of course, Nick Baumgardner along with Colton Pouncy. And Colton, this is a special episode. We should have had Chris on, but he's on vacation. Because this is technically the last episode of One of These Years. However, before you go crying and throwing things at your steering wheel or whatever you're doing, focus on the road. It is not the last episode of this podcast.
No.
And in fact, this podcast is about to get way, way cooler, I think, and much, much better. Colton, how are we doing today? You want to talk about what we got going on here? A lot of stuff to talk about today.
A lot of stuff, some exciting news coming up. We're not going to announce all of it on this episode, but I think we can get to a little bit of details here. We will have a new show. We are taking, as we announced a few months ago, we are taking the pod off the Athletics platform. And so with that comes a new feed, a new name of the podcast, which we will keep to ourselves for a little bit.
You'll get it soon.
You'll get it soon.
Not too much longer.
We like the name. Hopefully you guys like it too. You know, one of these years is honestly a great name, but we have to start a new one.
The Athletics
we're
keeping it. Maybe that's because it's such a good name. I think
that's why. Yeah.
But hey, no, whatever. No harm, no foul. Yes.
I think we're both excited about it. I think
totally.
The freedom to kind of do it how we want to do it, add some new ideas, bring on some guests. It's going to be a cool setup. And I'm excited about it. We're probably gonna get started around like mid-August, I think is kind of what we're targeting.
I think so, yeah.
And so we'll have some more details closer to then, but new show, new name, and some new stuff for you guys. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to shoot for there would be maybe the second preseason game, right? Because next week they're out in New York. I'm gonna be away actually, and then you're gonna be in New York. So next week's out, and then that'll give us some time to fiddle with the new stuff. This will be a Patreon show. We're going to do two shows, number one. So there's going to be two tiers. We're going to give away some of the details here. Not all of them. So it's going to be a Patreon show. Anyone familiar with those? I think most people are by now. Everything is going to exist right there. We do have the YouTube channel, which I will continue to populate with random stuff. Colton, whenever he feels like it too. But also I think what we're going to do with that is right now I've been uploading full episodes of the podcast to it. That'll probably stop. But what we will do is I think I'll upload clips and we'll upload, different things like that. And then probably, frankly, some of the shows that we do, I think, we could probably make them free in time. Like they won't be right away. Like, obviously the paid subscribers will be the number one priority there. But yes, we will still have the YouTube channel. You can still talk to us on all that sort of thing. And who knows what we'll do on there. Maybe we'll do some weird stuff there too coming down the road. But okay, cool. I'm going to explain what we're going to do. You cool with that? We're going to explain the process of how we're going to go, or the new platform of the show, whatever we'll say. All right. So, as you know, most of this, since Chris and I started it back whenever it was, when Patricia was still the coach, which is just a long time ago, we were very sporadic with our recording on purpose because it was, and it still has been for Colton and I. It's secondary to our jobs here at the Athletics, so it was always in addition to writing. So recording was always very sporadic, and we often tried to do it later in the week so we had time to go back and look at things. And of course, jobs were pulling people in different directions back then and all that. So that's fine. That's done. We were sporadic. We heard all your complaints, and we just never changed it because we never figured we had to, and we didn't want to. However, we are going to go to Patreon. We are going to have a fee involved with this. So we are going to be much more consistent with the recording, and actually we're going to have an addition too. I think we're going to pencil in Wednesday as a regular recording day, and that'll be, for the cheaper first tier members, regular recording day on Wednesday. You get that every week. That'll be video and audio form right there in Patreon, and we'll explain all that to you in coming days. Obviously, follow our Twitters for more information there. The second show, Colton, which I think is going to be really fun, will feature me and anyone I could find, including, maybe Brendan, maybe Chris, probably Brendan, probably Chris, other people too.
Max Boltman, James Edwards are already down to come on.
All of our Detroit people here. We're going to do a live cast with me for, I think, every game. We're going to try and do every Lions game. So you'll be able to, if you're a subscriber to Tier 2, you'll get the Wednesday show and the Sunday show, and you'll be able to watch the game with me and my idiot friends.
I think we're calling it the Baumgardner cast, right?
Yes, the Baumgardner cast. We'll call it until somebody finds a different name for it.
Yeah.
But yes, I don't know if we'll do every single game because there might be one or two that I want to actually go to. But if we don't, we'll make up something in another form. So essentially, the podcast is going to grow. We're going to do a lot more with it. We're excited. I know there's always been demand for it. I know, Colton, I'm sure you've heard similar forever. Like we would like more of this.
Yeah.
We would prefer more of this, all that. And I think we can do that, right? I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, and just to be clear, our written content will still appear on The Athletic. This is not
nothing
like
changes there.
we're still doing that. It's just I think this allows us to kind of expand our horizons with this podcast. And like honestly, when it was on The Athletic's platform, like that was sort of a weekly thing we did. We like doing it, but it's also kind of just like we'll do this on our own time. And I think with this new show, because it is going to be a paid show, we want this to be something that you are happy with. The product needs to be at a level that you guys want.
Right.
And so I think we will take this a little bit more seriously and we'll put in the work to, hopefully make it worth your while and have some fun with it too. Like I think the idea to have some guests with Nick hosting that is really cool. As soon as we kind of talked about, I think we kind of had the same idea at the same time.
Yeah, it was weird because I was like, well, we'll definitely do 2 shows was my first thought, right? And I was like, we should definitely do a live show. And then I was like, maybe we'll do one after the games or something like that. And then I was
that's kind of hard with me writing and going to press conference after the game.
You said just do it during the game. And I was like, oh shit, there we go. That's actually perfect for 1,000 different reasons. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And most importantly, it'll involve all the listeners. Like that's the coolest part. I've been thinking about doing these forever. And it's one of these things I've just never had time to do it. I thought about this all the way back when I was covering Michigan. Like, I would have loved to have been able to leave the stadium, go sit in my house, watch the game with my screens, and then, stream it with people, like, and just talk about what we're seeing during the game, like I do with you when we sit upstairs. So, and maybe we'll have Colton call in, right, at halftime.
I can hop in at halftime for sure. Yeah.
All that. And he can pull whoever is walking around. We'll figure it out. So it'll be fun. We want it to be pretty interactive. I think it will be. And all of our Detroit people around here will be involved, whether they know it yet or not. Brendan's in Paris. I think he wrote about Simone Biles the other day, which is pretty awesome. Nice. So he doesn't know any of this is going on, but he will when he comes back. And he'll
honestly, Brendan's been the one like pushing us to get more involved.
He has been.
Years, so.
And I would say this too, Colton. I want to not to cut you off, but speaking of Brendan, when I started at The Athletic, he and I talked a lot to people about we were going to do that show together. And we only ended up doing it for like a year, if that, because jobs got changed and different and weird and all that. I don't know if that show ever returns, it'll be something along the lines of what we're doing here. It'll be involved with what we're doing. So I think that's my last message on that front. But yeah, I'm excited. Colton, you got anything else to add on the new news here before we move into some training camp stuff here?
No, I guess I thank you to everyone that's listened to this show specifically. I know it started years ago when Nick and Chris were kind of running the point, and appreciate everyone that kept listening when I joined. Tried to fill in those shoes and step in there, and it's been a lot of fun, and hopefully that continues with this new one. So yeah, thank you all for listening.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. And Chris is on vacation. I'm sure he would say the same. That when we started it wasn't even on The Athletic, and then it got so popular because there were so many Lions fans because the Lions sucked, and they were like, well, The Athletic's like they're not going to, Yeah. So frankly, the reason why we were able to hang around that long on the Athletic app is because when Colton came on, I think the thing grew to a degree. So yes, the biggest of thanks to all of you. In fact, we wouldn't even have had the whatever to start a new one if people hadn't reached out to us and said 1,000 different times, we would pay for this if you guys give it a shot. So even if it's 20 people, man, I don't care. We're going to do it for fun. We're going to have fun with it and move forward. Yeah. What else?
I would say that growth probably coincided with team success more so than my arrival. Just put that out there, but absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys.
That seems to be the thing. You have like the Midas touch. And then when you leave, it's the disaster touch.
People tell me that, but I also covered like a 2-5 Michigan State team. They were 10-3 when I first got there, and they went 7-6 back years. So I don't know if that's true.
COVID year doesn't count. We can't count that. That's fake. But when you left Michigan State, they completely collapsed. So I think that's maybe the only.
There might have been some other reasons for that.
You can't leave the Lions, Colton. Anyway, yes, there's some other reasons for that. Anyway, we're not talking about that today.
Nope.
We've got a lot of training camp stuff to get into as the pads have come on. First week is actually Colton was out there today as we're recording on Wednesday, and they actually went light as they were pretty heavy on Monday and Tuesday, the first 2 days of pads. They'll probably go, I would assume, heavy again at the end of the week and then travel to New York. And Colton, we're going to talk about Taylor Decker here in a second. We had him written down because he's got a new contract, but I want to get your initial vibes maybe because we try to do this every year of where they're at once the pads came on. Like it's just now a couple of years for you. You've seen the progression of the roster. You remember what it was like a few years ago, right? Like on the first day of pads. Very different. Very, very different, is it not? I mean, like, it's impossible to ignore that this looks like a playoff team practicing pretty much every time they're out there.
Every time. And, like, it's something Campbell kind of addressed early on, I think, in training camp. Just, like, the differences between that first and second year even to where they are now, or felt like they're running around, like heads spinning, all these young players and
Crazy.
undrafted free agents that were like clearly going to make the roster, but like they didn't know what they were doing either. And now you look, a couple years later, and what not only the strength of the roster, but just the knowledge and the continuity that you have on staff with the core players in place, keeping those guys around, locking them up so there are no camp distractions like elsewhere,
Yep.
like in San Francisco and Dallas. You don't have any of that right here. They're just focusing on ball. They are a well-oiled machine. You can see it every time they step on the field. And now it's to a point where like, the top half of the roster is going to be strong. But it's at a point now where, that that second tier, like the guys where you're just not so sure about how they're going to fit in, even those guys are ascending, and like those young players entering year 3 and year 4 that were kind of mid-round picks, those guys are stepping forward. And it's like you see the strength of the roster growing and lifting every time they step out on the field. So it is a cool thing to see, and something you really notice when you're out there.
You could write a book about, and somebody probably will, about the first Dan Campbell season, and especially the training camp, even just because it was so. And the second one was like this too, but the first one especially so. Even Campbell and the coaches were like high wired. You know what I mean? Like they were like still freaking out a little bit, trying to figure out what they were doing. Like I remember they had I think it was the first year, and I think they may have done this the second year. One day, Campbell let the players just like lead the entire practice. The coaches went inside.
He's done that a couple times.
Yeah, he did it a bunch then that first year, and it was like total chaos the first time, and then they're like, whatever. And then a couple times passed, they were doing so much like experimentation, and they were changing so much on the fly and just trying to figure out, like what was working. But there was this like, you could feel it very early, and it's still there today. That's the thing that he talked about on the first day of training camp, trying to protect the team's culture. That even back then in the spaz out days when nobody knew what they were doing, like they were all doing it together. Like they were all, it was that island of misfit toys. Like we are not supposed to be here. Most of us aren't even supposed to be on an NFL roster. Like they all think our coach is a meathead idiot, like blah, blah, blah. So there was a lot of that to it. And then they just found their groove together, and then they just grinded and grinded. And now, like you said, Colton, it's like you don't have guys slipping and falling and like tripping over themselves. There's not like, you don't have to wait an hour and a half to see like a cool play in 11 on 11. Like it's pretty much every other 10 minutes. It's the backups that are good. Like the third string guys in here now are legit football players. Like I've seen depth at positions across the board that 3 years ago you would have had no chance having guys like that in here.
Some of those guys might have been starters years ago.
Big time. Yes, absolutely. Like across the board. And I think you're now also seeing guys that want to be here in some of those cases, that would want a chance to play here because they like what's going on. Kevin Zeitler, right? Another example there. It's the vibe has completely changed, almost exactly the way that you would have hoped it would have back in the first few days when you're throwing the seeds down and saying like, let's just plan it with hard work and see what happens. And like, that's kind of where they're at. And talent has kind of come along for the ride with it. And because it feels the same and it feels different, right? Like it feels very similar, but it also feels like so much smoother and easier and like calmer, but also, they're getting great work in too. So it's just a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. I think early on it was about like, I know it sounds cliche, but like, laying the foundation of what they want this to look like. And I think back then it was like, we have a certain standard of work that we need to establish here. And like, it doesn't matter if you're talented, if you don't have that work ethic, like you need both. You can't just be one or the other. And so I think early on they were kind of leaning that way. And they were able to find a few pieces right away, whether it was Penei Sewell or Amon-Ra St. Brown, that like fit that culture, that mindset that they wanted. But you obviously can't get like 20 of those guys in one off season. So I think the biggest difference now is they've been able to stack those draft classes and add in free agency over the years to really build out the roster with players that fit both mindsets. Like the talent part has really raised, as we've seen. But even these guys that they're adding, they're very specific about how they're wired, that mindset that they have. And I think it's taken some time, but what you see now is that finished product where they do have guys that are wired both ways and have the talent, and it's matching what they want this thing to look like, the vision they had from years ago. And like I've seen in 2021, that's a slow process. You got to let those guys come, and you got to be careful about who you add to that mix. You don't want to mess it up, especially early on. But now they're at a point where you just see the whole collective product, and it's like, man, they've done a great job just finding those guys. Because a lot of teams would sacrifice culture or environment for the sake of a talented guy. that might have a bad background,
Mhm.
might not be a hard worker, might put down his teammates in the wrong situation when things aren't going his way.
Right.
They don't really have those dudes, and I think like it's really one of the more underrated aspects of the Holmes Campbell era. But they haven't deviated from like that plan and that vision that they had early on, and it's kind of it led to what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, that's really well put. I think that what you see in addition to it is like you mentioned earlier, this is training camp. Obviously, it's the most important time of year in so many ways for so many people on the team. And you don't have any nonsense happening here. There's no, and it's not because they just went to the championship game last year. It's because, like you said, you mentioned it. We're going to talk about Taylor Decker. They have taken care of people systematically, exactly how they said they were going to do it. And I think that the longer I've been around football over the years, the coaches that get the best, the absolute best out of their guys at this time of year are the ones that make it like impossible for you to not go out there and work hard for him. Like, how can you look at Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and the organization right now, and you're on the team, and it's like they're doing literally everything to make sure that you can, that you're going forward in the right direction. And when you look around the league, you got guys holding out over pennies, and you got guys sitting out over stuff that's bullshit, and it's not happening here.
No.
Decker obviously on what was it? I think it was Monday, right? First day of pads.
Mm-hmm.
They announced the 3-year deal for him. 3 years, 60 million. It's 30 guaranteed, right? Colton? Something like that. 32.
31.83 million guaranteed.
Right. And we'll get into the particulars of that in a second. But the biggest takeaway for everybody, I think, for the most part, was that Decker went to Dan Campbell in March and said, I want this to go a certain way, but I also don't want to be lied to, and I want to know what you guys are thinking. And he said, this is the order of how things are going to go. That when your number's up, you're going to get your deal. It's going to be fine. And it's exactly how it's went. Decker could have held out. He could have sat out. He could have thrown a fit 5 years ago. He probably would have. And that's not anything against Taylor Decker. He's a good dude 5 years ago. He's a good dude today. 5 years ago, this franchise was a disaster. He probably would have held out.
Yeah.
This year, no, I won't do that. I trust him. Boom. Taken care of on the first day of pads. I mean, like outstanding. That is A+ stuff that very few teams are having the groove right now. It's just not a thing that you see every day.
I think I wrote about this. The nonchalant nature of everything about the suspension is just
insane.
Typical Lions right now, right? Like Brad Holmes goes on 97-1. He's asked about, beating the market with some of these deals he did in April, which was another smart thing when you look at what's happening now with Darisaw getting paid and all these receivers getting paid. So you get St. Brown done, all the quarterbacks as we see now. Like hell, the Cowboys going to pay Dak like $60 million.
I know they're all freaking out. Cowboys Twitter's just panicking,
as they should. What the hell were they doing over there?
I know,
but like he was asked about that, and he's just like, "Yeah, we think it's important to pay your guys and get that taken care of as soon as possible." Like, yeah, we just finished something with Decker, so we're happy about that. The way he just casually mentioned it, and they had to be like, "Wait, what?" Like,
yeah, right.
We're outside on the sideline watching like warm-ups, and then that hits Twitter, and we're just like, "Wait a minute. Did he just announce this on 97.1? Okay,
right.
yeah, we got to type this up." And then for Decker to be like, "Yeah, I mean, like, I just want to be here. I didn't want to go anywhere else." I told him like, "Hey, just tell me what the deal is. Be honest with me." And Campbell even said like, it's important for us to be transparent with our players, and that sometimes it's not always the easiest conversation, but it's going to be the right one. And I think you saw that with Decker. They're like, "Hey, we're going to get some other guys done, but we'll get back to you. You have our word." And Decker's like, "All right, cool. I'm not going to sit out. I'm showing up." And they got it done like in the most casual way. And I think that's just how the Lions do business these days. And like their players know, like, hey, if we tell you we want you, then we're going to be true to our word. So like another example of how things are changing here, I guess.
Yeah, it's not really much more difficult or harder to explain than that, because when you think about, we talk a lot about pillars on the show, and we write about that, and Taylor Decker isn't necessarily that guy that's gonna, he wasn't when the thing started, because you didn't know necessarily, right? Like, who knows? He's a good player and all that, but culturally and mentally, like Taylor Decker is a football player, like all the way, like through and through. He'll be a guy with his name on a ring in the stadium someday or whatever, and doing radio with Lomas someday. Like, that's what he's like. He's got that Spielman thing to him, where I can remember when they gave him, Bob Quinn actually gave him his last extension. And I can remember when they gave him that, and he got choked up at that one, and they sucked. They were so bad, and he didn't care. He was like, I want to be the guy that helps whoever is here, fix it. I remember Taylor being crushed when Stafford left, not just because it was like the end of whatever, or because they were good friends, but because he was like, we didn't win here for him, and we should have done more for him. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of guy that when Campbell took the job, and he's talked about over the years, like they circled a few players like these, we can do a lot with these guys, but a big old one around Taylor Decker. And it's like, that's because he'll do whatever's asked, and he's tough and he grinds it out, and everyone loves him. And it's like pretty impossible not to see, right? He's just a really, really solid football playing, awesome locker room guy, and perfect for the culture that they have here. I think, that an offensive lineman can do that and set the tone for everyone else. Like it feels like there's like no pressure here on Penei Sewell, because it feels like Decker and those guys take it away from him. You know what I mean? Like, he's just a special dude, and he's earned all of it. I think everybody said that.
He really is special, and he's one of our favorite players to talk to. I think that's pretty obvious if you ask anyone in Lions media. He won the Good Guy Award that we give out to a player for his work with the media a couple years ago, I believe. So he's a great guy. I mean, like, even when they lose, he's always the one that puts things into perspective. When they win, he's the guy to keep people grounded. You don't let guys like that walk away, especially how long he's been here. He's the longest tenured player on the team. He's clearly like one of the dudes and one of the pillars in that locker room. And he wants to be here. That's the most important thing. A lot of guys like wouldn't say, I want to retire a Detroit Lion. And he said that multiple times, said that at his press conference the other day. And now he's got another 3-year deal. I think he'll be, early 30s, mid 30s by the time that deal expires. So we'll see what his future looks like then. But you don't let a guy like that walk away, especially right now when you're just starting to win. You're just now reaping the rewards of a long rebuild. He was a guy that you drafted to, be an anchor for this franchise. He's been just that, and his play hasn't declined. If anything, he's only getting better with age.
I think so too. It's at least steadied, if nothing else.
It's pretty steady. So you don't let guys like that leave, and the Lions are smart to lock him up when they could. So, I mean, another great deal for them.
It sounds so easy, but it doesn't always happen. And it's one of those things that if you think back, like, these are the contracts. These are absolutely the contracts that people overthink, that we could draft a guy. And, I'm always guilty of this. We bring it up all the time about like, you could do this whenever X, Y, and Z. But it was always like, whenever Taylor if he's still functioning, then there'd be no point to move on. And I think that's the thing, that the Belichickian era of the NFL, he would have gotten penny pinched here and traded or cut or whatever, and it would, you know what I mean? They would have not given him a 3-year deal. No. They would have tried to, and that's the like MLB crap that everybody saw yesterday on the trade. When we can maybe we're crappy, but we can maybe get a little bit better right here. So we got to do this, and we got to keep trading and moving along. That happens still in the NFL. It's just not necessarily the way that it does in other sports. And I think in another era with another regime, this would have been the perfect time for a penny pinching group to say, we're not going to pay this guy, because at the end of that contract, he's not going to be as good today, blah, 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 all that. But this is not, context is you're trying to win a Super Bowl, and this is one of your most solid people that you have in the organization. It's just like the easiest thing to do, and not everybody does it. And I think that if nothing else, maybe that's what the Lions' secret has been, is that they've just started to do the easy things. Like, maybe that's the golf thing, right? Work on your short game, and everything else follows along. I don't know. Yeah. But it's been smooth stuff.
I don't think there's a secret sauce. I think they're just paying the best players.
Right.
That goes a long way. It's very simple. You pay your talented players.
You're pretty much admitting it too. Yeah.
Make them happy. Like, it's not like you're, and really these contracts haven't been unreasonable either. Like, they've gotten good deals.
They've gotten good deals.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
That Sewell deal is going to be
insane.
Yes. In like 2 years. My God.
Incredible.
I mean, so like, it might look like a lot of money right now, but it's going to age well.
Oh,
and they're
really
paying
well.
Their top players, and they're doing it early.
Goff could have screwed him, and he didn't.
Could have, right? Yeah. And I'm just saying, like, I think they're doing everything right.
I do too.
A weird thing to say about this franchise, but I think they're handling it the right way, the exact way you want. So, yeah.
Well, moving forward to another one that's going about as well as you could ask through a week anyway. Jameson Williams, which is, really Jameson's been the talk of training camp the last 2 years, but and for polar opposite reasons. I think there's been a lot of people, Colton, who have. Well, here comes the hype train again on Jameson. Here comes the choo-choo. Like, we don't believe it until whatever. And, to a degree, I can understand some of that. I understood that last year. I don't understand it this year, because last year everybody was pretty honest with what happened, and it was not good. It was a really bad situation. I think no one pulled any punches, the team included, and he has been as advertised. He has been a man on a mission. He has been a different person, a different player, obviously, too. But Colton, you're around these guys more than I am. Jameson Williams, to me, is a different person today than we saw 2 years ago or a year ago. Looks like a guy who lives here now. Looks like a guy who's just part of the thing now. You know what I mean? Like finally comfortable. Really cool to see. I mean, it's been a cool thing.
Yeah, he just seems a lot more calm, I would say, and he's still
Yep.
a JMO. That personality didn't leave.
Oh yeah.
But I just think he's like, I don't know, he's just fitting in, and that's like the only way I can describe it. And to speak to the hype that he gets, I don't think it's hype. He does get attention, and last year especially because of his offseason, the gambling thing, all eyes are going to be on him,
That's true
regardless
too.
if he was actually performing well or not.
Yep.
And I would say that he was performing okay. I mean, he still had some mental lapses, and then all of a sudden he gets hurt. So it's like, okay, we barely saw anything. So again, I think I said this on the last pod, but I didn't really understand that at the time. And so I think, that's some of that confusion I don't really understand. But like when you look at him this offseason, I look at it has to be two parts. Are you doing it in the spring, and is it carrying over to training camp? And there are a few players I think you can make the case for. Levi Onwuzurike is doing that. Jameson's a guy that they hyped up in spring, and you're seeing it carry over to training camp right now.
Yeah.
And so when I see both aspects like that, that's a strong, full offseason that JMO has never had since he's been in Detroit. And when I look at him, last year it was like, oh, you jot a note down when he gets a rep with the first team before he's, goes back down to the second team, and Nate Sudfeld,
right.
Nowadays,
wasting time.
Yeah, wasting away with Nate. Nowadays, he's out there with Goff every single time. And now we're looking at who's the wide receiver 3 next to him and saying, because he's out there every single time, and you don't worry about him, and you're wondering like, oh, is he going to make a play on this one? And then he does. And it's like, oh, Goff is targeting him without hesitation. He's throwing the deep ball. They're connecting more. He's doing the intermediate stuff, and the routes look crisp, and he knows his depth and where to stop. And it's like, that's the stuff that we weren't seeing a year ago. And that's the stuff that's different to me. And so when I watch him now, he just looks like one of the guys, and he's having a really strong spring, a really strong summer, I should say. He looks really good. We don't want to overhype him too much, I guess, because like, again, we got to see him do it in games, but this is everything that you want if you're a Lions fan. And if you're the Lions as a team, as an organization, he's exactly where he needs to be, and he's doing pretty well.
This is the draft pick that you thought or you hoped that you would get when you drafted him. And prospect for him still, albeit to be fair, because he hasn't done anything in a game really. Well, he has to some degree, but he hasn't, taken off yet, as we'll say. But when they drafted him 11th or whatever it was, this is what this guy that we have seen with the second level speed and the ridiculous explosion and the ability to like put the brakes on the sideline and get his feet down. All of that with like 7 or 8 more pounds on his frame, because he has done that. And I think that that's something that is very hard to notice because he's such a small guy and a skinny dude, and he's kind of long.
Yeah.
But if you look through the middle and you look at his legs, and if you go back and you look at practice tape from 2022, my God, it looked like his shoulder pads were going to knock him over. Like he didn't look like he could hold him up. The first day of camp, they were running sideline routes, and he is making plays that not only he never would have made in 2 years prior. He would have dropped it, run the wrong route, not gotten his feet in, whatever it would have been. The quick bang bang stuff, he's doing it in such like smooth, under control manner that it looks like Amon Ra. It's the closest thing. I was like, that's what he caught one over there and tiptoed both in front of a bunch of reporters and came back and asked us if we all liked it, right? and just like didn't break stride. And it was like, my God, like he is just in a groove, and it stayed that way all day, never changed. Next time I see him, same thing. And then talking to you guys, same thing every day. And he's working, and it's the same exact, and they're running these reverses. My God, no one's even come close to stopping these yet. He's had a terrific camp, and you can finally, if you go out there and watch, you can finally now fully see what he is and what he can be and do for this offense, correct? Because we have seen him blow the top off and get loose and catch a few 80-yard bombs here in the first week, and they haven't really done anything yet.
Exactly. I'm watching them out there, and they did a situational period at the end of practice yesterday. And the situation was 51 seconds left in the game, down 30-24, ball on, I believe, their own 49 if you're the offense. So you got 51 yards to score.
Right.
One timeout. And I'm watching the sequence. I actually charted this in my story the other day. First pass goes to St. Brown, gain of 18, down to 31. Second pass, right to JMO, gain of 9. And this is like a late game situation. So Goff is like not hesitating. It's 11 on 11, full pads, tackle live, and goes to JMO. 2nd and 1, puts him in a good position. Very next play, Goff takes an end zone shot to JMO. Good coverage, kind of not a play to make on the ball. Kind of threw it away in the back of the end zone. But the fact that he went to him twice in a row in a late game situation, I'm like, okay, that's something. Then they come back. They had a 4th and 1 after a couple of plays. And on a 4th and 1, game on the line, Goff threw it to Jameson Williams. He catches it with his hands out in front.
Okay.
Down to the 8-yard line, first down, and they end up scoring on that drive and win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And like that to me, I'm like, Goff targeted him 3 times. He catches 2 of them, both huge catches in a late game scenario, and he's not hesitating. It doesn't look off. It looks right. That's when I was like, all right, yeah, this thing's coming along. Like,
yeah, it's different.
It's different, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, Jameson said that he spent some time with Goff in LA. I wonder how much some was, because they I mean, somebody said this the other day out there, and I think it's right. I don't think Jameson takes reps with any other quarterback. I don't think he. I think that him and Amon-Ra and maybe Laporta only throw with Goff. Like, if you really watch it close, Laporta might do other stuff. Amon-Ra, I guess, might bounce around and not really care. But it almost feels like it's on purpose.
I think they do try to do that.
Yeah, that Jameson is in Goff's, even when they're throwing on air, when they just walk out there, he is with him for literally every single throwing session that Goff is throwing to another human. Jameson is like great. And if he's not doing that, he's with Ben Johnson or Randall L.
Yes.
That's what he does every day.
Yeah.
I don't, like people were joking about when we said the thing where he caught the touchdown when he puked the one day. He caught the touchdown, did like a ridiculous dance, threw the ball, jumped over a railing, on cleats, onto cement, did another dance, came back, jumped again, and then sprinted another 50 yards, then puked. Like, so this is what he's doing. And then he got right back up and right back in. So, I mean,
that's some real grit right there.
He's been a ball of energy and like, yeah, right. I mean, exactly what, this is the guy that you hope you drafted. I don't know how else to say that but it feels like his rookie year again, because you're like, we got to see him do this in games. And that includes the preseason. That includes next week when you go to New York. Like, got to see him making other defensive backs look silly a little bit, right? Like, it can't just be stuff that you do here and it's comfortable. Now we got to see it somewhere else. That's the next big step for him. But like, I wrote in the story that we did the other day, like, it's not hype, it's what's happening. Like, this is just what's happening. He's been a different player. He's been outstanding, and there's really if you have eyes, it's impossible not to see that.
This looks like Bama JMO.
Yeah, right.
The Bama player that the Lions thought they were drafting. And I do want to point this out real quick. I think JMO sat down with Dan Miller and kind of mentioned how important Teddy Bridgewater was to his development. That's something we talked about last year, how he's going to get him right. And he said Teddy really helped him hone in on his focus and helping him become an NFL player, getting into the playbook, which he was familiar with from his days in New Orleans, knowing Dan Campbell and things like that, just some terminology. So he really credited Teddy for that. And now Teddy's down in Florida. He's a coach. So I'm sure a lot of the players he's coaching are going to learn a lot from a guy like that. And the fact that JMO can do the same from Teddy, I think, and I give him that credit. I thought that was really mature of him and
really cool.
Some perspective that he probably would not have been able to give a few years ago. So,
I mean, how cool, really cool when a plan comes together. They signed Teddy Bridgewater last year, right around now, and people were like, what's he here to do? Is he here to push? And he was here for Jameson. He was here because they were about to go in there after he got hurt and say, dude, you're about done. You are about done. We're about to pull the rug. You lost all your money. This has been a bust. Bye. And then Teddy walks in, puts the arm around the shoulder and says, like, you need to learn how to be a professional. Like, that's literally all this is. And there you go. And I mean, how cool is that? That's awesome. Awesome so cool that he saw it, and like awesome that Teddy Bridgewater does that, doesn't make a big deal about it, and then just rides off and is doing it for somebody else.
Absolutely.
That's exactly how it's supposed to go. Really good stuff there. What else we got this week, Colton? Like, I mean, there's been a lot going on. What other things have caught your eye at the top of the list here throughout Lions camp?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's caught my eye early on in training camp is just 3 players from the 2021 class: Levi Onwuzurike, Derek Barnes, and Iffy. And those 3 players, I think, are in pretty interesting spots in their careers because they're starting to have some progress here. And like, I think if those guys click and they come along, you're looking at the 2021 class that already features St. Brown and Penei Sewell, and all of a sudden that class looks really good. And I'm looking at Derek Barnes. I wrote about him the other day. He's been getting in some camp dust-ups here, some little fights and some pushing and shoving. And Barnes is like one of the nicest guys in that locker room. So that is like very surprising to me. And I asked him about it. I pulled him aside. I was like, hey, man, like you're getting a little intense out there. Like what's going on? And he's like, he had a quote for me. I think he said, there's a difference between being a good guy and being nice. Mm-hmm. I'm done being nice on the field.
Oh, sounds like a wrestling promo.
Exactly. I was like, all right, thank you. You just gave me my quote for my story. I appreciate that, man. But I loved it because it definitely like describes how he's playing. He's out there, pushing things to the whistle every single time. They're playing him at that Sam linebacker spot, which I think is so perfect for him.
Yeah, that is really perfect.
I think on Tuesday, there's a one play where he had a sack on Goff, and obviously didn't tackle him, but let up. And I'm like, okay, that's a sack for Barnes off the edge playing Sam. And a couple series later, drops into coverage, picks Goff off, and it looks very reminiscent of his interception against Baker Mayfield in the divisional round.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, this is why you draft a guy like this, and you develop him over years. You find the right spot. It's taken some time, but I really think that's the best spot to make him a playmaker because he can make plays off the edge and you can drop him into coverage and he can read and cover a tight end and also make a play in the air. So I think that hybrid role is perfect for him. And you're just watching him out there in practice. And I'm just like, this is a guy that might have a breakout year. And I know he already had one kind of last year, but I think Jack is perfect in that Mike spot. You put Anzalone at will and you put Barnes at Sam. Like, I think they figured out that linebacker spot really well. And that's something that we couldn't say years ago. But I think everyone's exactly where they need to be right now. So we can talk about Barnes for a second because he's the first one that kind of caught my eye.
They've been so patient with him, and it's been really cool to see. And he's been a big part of that too, because done being nice is obviously what you want, but like he is a really level-headed guy who has taken some injuries and adversity and all that and gotten through it. And playing, they didn't know what he was, I don't think, when they drafted him, right? Like he's played all over the place. And like you said it, he's not really a stacked linebacker. He's not really a defensive end, but he's kind of like, he is a hybrid like that we don't normally think about. We think of like hybrids who are, that can just do maybe two things. Derek could do like 3 or 4 things in a weird way because it comes in a different package. But if you go back and look at like his combine, he had a 2.58 20-yard split in his 40, which he had a 4.58 40, which is awesome for a linebacker. But 2.58 20-yard split is beyond elite. That was better than Devin Bush. If anyone remembers Devin Bush in the same club, like that was better than Devin Bush. Like that, Derek Barnes can haul ass, and he's got almost 34-inch arms, despite being like 6 foot, maybe 6'1". So he can get underneath people, and he's got the length and just all gas. And like, Chris and I talked about this when they drafted him. When he was at Purdue, they would just put him up on the line in a 3-point stance and just say, "Go get it," and he would just run around a tackle and just go get somebody. It's a lot like James Houston, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
So when he says he's done being Mr. Nice Guy, it's like they've pretty much made it clear for him, like you need to fight to earn your way onto this team for, past your rookie contract. And it's not necessarily going to be what we thought it was going to be, but it could be at something else. And he's completely embraced it. Like, terrific to see that from him because he has had up and down stretches where in other cases, maybe you would have seen teams give up on him, but they've been playing so well that they haven't had to. And now, maybe it's going to pay off. Really cool to see.
He looks fantastic. I'll say that. Like, and he's another player. There are a few of these players. I think it's J-Mo. I think it's Barnes. I think Levi, who we'll talk about next, is another guy. I always get some tweets where it's like, oh, these same guys get hyped up every year.
Yeah, well, there's a reason for that.
Because the coaches are watching and they want to see these guys develop, right? And
they're really good athletes too.
And I do think, like, again, there's a difference between the messaging last year and this year. So, like, last year, speaking about Barnes in particular, Calvin Shepard said, watch out for Derek Barnes, okay? Like, everyone's talking about Jack because he's the rookie first-round pick. I get it. But Derek Barnes is not going down without a fight. And we are not going to play a player just because he's a first-round pick if he's not ready. When we have a guy that's playing better than him in my room who I trust. And what happens week 1? It's Barnes out there at Mike, and he's playing, and Jack is coming off the bench and subbing in. And that's how they did it until they kind of rearranged later in the year. But, like, that was the defense that they liked with Barnes there.
Right.
Now it's, okay, Barnes is taking that Sam spot. I think that's a really good home for him. And it might be more of a sub package. Like, you get him, they'll split it because, like, they have the nickel package and they have the Sam linebacker package. So he's still going to play a ton, and I think he can be even more effective in that role than he was at Mike last year. Okay, so you have that. Then you look at a guy like Levi. And Levi, it's like he's been hurt, man. He just hasn't played. So like the fact that he was out there at all last year was a step in the right direction, because some people were speculating that he might retire. I didn't know if that was true, but like, you want to see it, and he was out there, and he wants to play football, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you see him out there, and he's not doing much. He's repping with the 2s and the 3s, and it's like he's going to make the roster because he's a former second round pick, but like he's even in games, it's like, all right, he's inactive. He's a healthy scratch. So like, what are we really getting from him? I think later in the season, he started getting more reps and got a little more comfortable, started joining the rotation. Again, going back to spring, where I said I think you need to see the spring element and the training camp element. Kelvin Shepard was like, unprompted, Levi Onwuzurike is a player that's caught my eye. Keep an eye on him. Whenever Shep says something like that,
he doesn't even coach him.
Whenever Shep says something like that, I pay attention, because he knows that defense. He's like,
he's
my guys, my
yeah.
linebackers playing behind that defensive line. He knows like how they're performing. And so that caught my attention. And even Campbell said like, yeah, he's had our eye this spring. And then we asked him about Levi today. He's like, he's flashing. Like, we want to see him with the pads on, and he's living up to that. When you're looking at the defensive line, Levi has been out there with the first team pretty much every single day, every time they go out there. So like Campbell said, he's just one of our best guys right now. Just plain and simple, he's one of our best guys. And so again, this is different than last year. They weren't saying any of this a year ago. It was just like last year was, we're happy to have him. We're happy he's on the field because he wasn't playing for the last year and a half. Now it's okay, he's healthy. We don't even sense like a sense of urgency. It's just like the mind is there because he's playing, and he's not worrying about the body anymore.
Exactly.
And he's had a year of that to kind of get over it. Now it's just, let's focus on football. I tried to grab that man for one-on-one interviews the last 2 days. Both days, he'd be like, sorry, bro, I'm locked in. And I was like, are you going to do anything even with like the scrum? And he's like, probably not, but I appreciate you understanding. And I was like, all right, I respect that. He's locked in on football. He doesn't want to talk about his injuries. He wants to just focus on ball. He doesn't want to jinx it probably either, because he's playing well, and Campbell's talking him up. I just think he wants to put his head down and work. And that is, again, different than last year.
Totally different. Yeah.
Those two guys are guys that caught my attention. And then Iffy as well. I think he's fighting for a spot. Brian Branch is playing some safety. He's taking to that. I've seen him break up passes against Sam Laporta like each of the last 3 days, going against him one-on-one for slant routes. Like that class, those second round pick, a fourth round pick, third round pick, those three guys, if they're at the level of what they're looking like in camp, only adds to that class. I think that's probably Brad Holmes' best class at this point.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
We all talk about 2022, but I mean, if those guys are looking like they are so far in camp, that's a really, really strong draft class.
I mean, you talk about Barnes being a crazy athlete. Like Levi was a better athlete than McNeil coming out. Like, here it is. Barnes had the 2.8, 2.5, whatever it was, 20 split. Levi also had a sub-3. He was 2.9 at almost 300 pounds, and he's huge. He ran a 4.88, like jumped out of the building, is a massive freak athlete. Like they took him in front of Aleem. He's a better athlete. Like he was a better disruptor. No technique, was raw, and that's why the injury was such a bummer for him. But I think Ragnow said it actually when I was out there the other day, probably best, where he was like, I have respect for him if he were just in real life. He's got a horrible back thing that he had to overcome, and that is not fun to like even just walk around with. And the fact that he's dealing with that every day, and like pretty much every guy, right? I mean, every offensive lineman that you see when he's healthy says like Levi's really fucking good. Like you guys don't know that, but when he's right, like there's a reason why they constantly give him other chances. And if they cut him, he'd be picked up in 30 seconds because he's a freak athlete, and he's 20 some years old, So
absolutely
good to see that he's focused too. That's cool to hear.
He's locked
because it must, and it's got to be getting down to like last chance time to a degree, and that's that class, right? It's options and all that stuff. You got to make decisions,
right?
So we'll see how that that all goes. The other thing too, Colton, that I've noticed, and maybe I shouldn't. It's not a surprise anymore, I guess, and we talked about it a little bit. But is Jared Goff, and just everything has been smooth, of course, and everything's been going well. But it's hard not to watch him in those in the quick time and the quick drills when they go fast, because he's just at a master level now in a comfort level with Ben Johnson. This is this your full year 3, basically, we'll say, which is very rare anymore that a quarterback gets coordinator for that long. And I was saying this to somebody when I was out there. and I think it's worth bringing up because he's having another good camp, and I think he's going to have another good year. Jared Goff, in so many ways, changed how I look at quarterbacks, how I look at their futures. We'll say, not in the way that I didn't think that guys could have second chances or whatever. I've always been a proponent of that. I've said that on this show forever. Like, we quit on these guys way too fast.
Mm-hmm.
All that. I think that's still, he's still a great example, and was then and is now. I agree with that then, now, but like, forever it was the whole, like, you got to be big and strong and fast, and if you can't also run, and if you can't escape, and if you can't do this, then there's no point. There's really no point. We're not even going to get there. It's not even going to be it doesn't matter, because you can't move out of the way in time when somebody's coming at you, and blah blah blah. Well, that's just complete bullshit and really not true. I mean, because you do have guys in the NFL pretty much all the time, and Goff is the current example. But there's been others throughout history that, like, are so smart and are so fast with the processing in their brains that they wire themselves to shave off extra tenths of seconds in what they're doing to make up for all of the lack of foot speed that you think that they don't have. And it's like, it doesn't matter. And then it ends up not mattering. And it's like, when you look at some of these athletic quarterbacks out there that are super awesome athletes that are struggling to, do A, B, and C. And then you look at Jared Goff, who struggles, when he can't get protected or whatever it is, but never misses a read, never leaves one short or high over the middle, is always on time when it's supposed to be. Like, the ball is out every time, 2.5 seconds. He's been one of the fastest forever. Like, just, he is in a groove. He is in his peak, I feel like, right now as a player. And for me anyway, yeah, it's changed the way I look at quarterbacks in some ways, because it's like, it's reminded me that, like, what that position really is and is not about. And all that it is about, Jared Goff has all of it. There's really nothing he doesn't have. I mean, it's been really cool to see that continue into this year.
Also, I just think quarterback is so much, like, situation dependent. Like, what is your
all the way? Yeah.
What's your surrounding look like? And, like, I know people love to talk about the great quarterbacks in the league, right? Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. There's, like, only a handful of guys that can do that, right? That can throw the ball a million miles an hour and run by you. And, like, if you don't have that, it's not just like, oh, we're going to give up. You're going to have to still compete.
Exactly.
So, to me, after that, if you don't have those pure natural raw traits, like only 4 guys on the planet have,
yeah,
it's like, how can we build the best team around the guy that we do have and get the most out of his skill set and his ability, tailor an offense that fits that, and let's just do it our way, And I don't think there's this mold that you have to fit. Like, you don't have to do it the way Andy Reid does it with the Chiefs, with Pat Mahomes, the way Josh Allen and the Bills do it. And also, how many guys are really winning Super Bowls these days? It's like, not a ton. It's Pat Mahomes. Like, I don't see Josh Allen have any rings. I don't see Lamar have any rings. Like, they're getting far in the playoffs and falling short, just like the Lions did last year. So I think it's like, you just have to strike while the iron is hot. You have to keep a core in place that can get you in the playoffs, in the dance every year, and then hope that you can, win one, and that'll set. They get one Super Bowl in Detroit, people will never complain about anything ever again. And, like, I know it's saying a lot because they haven't done it, but, like, they're in as best a spot as they've ever been to make that happen. And they've done it with a guy like Jared Goff at quarterback, surrounding him with an offensive coordinator like Ben Johnson, who's so adaptable and gives him so many different options within a single play, so many answers to the tests. A running back duo like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, receivers like Jamo and Saint, Laporta, the offensive line. Like, the way they've done it is so, like, masterful, and not having a Patrick Mahomes. That's why they are where they are.
Yeah.
And so Jared is really the engine that makes that all go. He's the point guard. He gets it out to his playmakers. He's not going to make the errant mistake. He's matured into a point where, like, he's much more comfortable leading the offense, making calls at the line, getting them out of bad situations, and also taking care of the football. And so I think Jared Goff can win a Super Bowl for the Lions.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't doubt that. Like, I think that can absolutely happen. Will it happen? Who knows? But, like, he can. And to say that he's not good enough, or, the quarterback tiers that only rank players on traits, like, I don't think you should look at football like that. I don't think that's the best way to do it. And I think you can overlook some really talented players in some good situations when you do things like that. So I love what the Lions have in place right now with Jared Goff.
Especially at quarterback, you can't do it, because that's haven't I used to talk about this a lot when Stafford was here, and even in the interim between time where it was like, we're going to find out, about Jared Goff. But Stafford had still does, the inside, the mental thing that quarterbacks like, that they can't explain, that only like a handful of them actually ever do. And it's like the ability, it's what we talk about with corners times a billion. It's the ability to just deposit whatever just happened in the trash and then forget about it and then go right to the next like second, without, like, if Jared Goff does make a mistake, go watch the next time he has the ball. They either score a touchdown like every time, or they get, in field position or do something. They do something. He does not completely fall apart at a mistake. He does not let a mistake on a drive completely kill a drive. I used to talk about that a lot with Stafford, how he would get them out of 2nd and 25s because somebody would have a stupid penalty and he'd get them out of it. Like, we have seen Jared do some of that too. Like, and it's the way he plays and the way he communicates, I think, with everybody on the field, but also his coach. Like, he has that, whatever it is, we don't see it because they're there every day speaking it, but like, he has the mind of a coach and the perfect mind for a quarterback, and that it's the analytical mind that sees everything, but also the one that moves so fast that it's able to just drop whatever, and then come back to it later, right, and fix it again. There's a confidence there with him that, we saw him get rattled as hard as a player can get rattled and then fight all the way through it. Like, how many quarterbacks in 2021 would have gotten halfway through that 08 and whatever, oh, my knee hurts, and that's it, I'm going to sit out the rest of the year. Like, no, he took every shot the rest of the way and got better. So, yeah, I probably haven't said it enough over the years. We've written it, God knows, but like this, it's just reminded me, just standing out there the other day, like how smooth he looks with everything. Like, the anticipation throws over the middle, and Jameson is hit on a bunch of those too. Reynolds isn't there anymore, obviously. But that was the big, thing that Josh was always so good with Jared. They had the great connection. He has that now with everybody. Yeah. And like, it's really been a different thing to see, and cool to watch how comfortable he is as the leader of everything. How many people now come up to ask him for autographs, all this sort of thing. Like, he's a star.
His name every practice now.
Yeah, they're still doing that, which apparently that's never going to end. So never. Yes, it's been a great camp so far, and it's hard to say anything different because Goff got a contract this offseason too, and some people barked about that. And no, I don't think there was anything wrong with that. I think that contract was just fine, and he's earned every penny of it. He probably could have weaseled out more out of him if he wanted to. I think he would have been right in doing it. He's been that good.
Yes, and he just looks so calm, cool, collected these days. Yep. Like, I think there was a time early on where it's like, yeah, is he going to be the guy? We don't know. Mm-hmm. He's probably reading some of that stuff. It might be getting to him a little bit. None of that is there now. He knows he's here. The teammates respect him. They love him. He can hear the love from the fans and the stadium every time he steps foot on the practice field even. And it's really cool to see how far he's come as a Lion. And I think it should be stated that, like, what he's overcome in a couple years is pretty remarkable, and it's a cool story to talk about.
Yep.
And
he's an important reminder. Yeah. Important reminder of not only guys that, don't always have to show how tough they are, or talk to you about how tough they are.
Yeah.
They can show it. And then it's the other reminder of just like, there's 5,000 ways to skin a cat. The quarterback does not have to run a 4.4 and weigh 250 pounds and do a backflip. And like, that's great if they can do all those things, but it is not necessary in any stretch of any imagination. So really cool to see. Moving forward, Colton, before we wrap up here, you're going off to New York here next week. Lions are out, Sunday or this weekend anyway?
Yeah.
And then they will be out there all week with the HBO mid-year Hard Knocks. Did you watch any of this? The Giants summer Hard Knocks?
I've watched it against my will on Twitter because they put every clip of that show on my timeline.
I think you should check out a couple episodes because it is like,
is that GM going to get fired by the end of the year?
Maybe. It feels like a handbook. It feels like a handbook in how not to handle a negotiation with like a superstar. Because during the show, we're getting off track, but whatever. During the show, no less than like 10 people come up to him on the edits, like including Mara, the owner, and are like, you understand that he is easily our best and most popular player, right? Like, you get that, right?
We'd really hate to lose Saquon. We'd really hate to lose him to our arch rival.
Well, yeah, and then that's where it lands because they go through the whole thing, and he's like, no one's going to give him anything. He keeps telling himself no one wants him. Yeah. He's overrated. It's like, and then at the end, Mara comes in and says, "Boy, it would really suck to lose him to like Philly or something." Yeah. And then that's what happened. So it's like, I don't know how things are going for the Giants right now, but we're about to find out, I guess. I don't know. What do you expecting or looking for coming in next week here?
Yeah, I mean, we saw them last year. They came to Allen Park.
Yeah, before Daniel Jones fell apart, we did. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that team just confuses me the way they've kind of built it. I am excited to see Malik Neighbors.
Yes,
he's a really explosive receiver. Loved him coming out of the draft. Obviously, the Lions were in no position to get him, but yeah, just a fun player to watch. So seeing him and his blazing speed against the secondary and Terrion, that would be a fun matchup. You know, one of the best receivers in that class versus one of the best young corners. I mean, Ennis too. He's right up there with them. Speaking of those two, those are two corners that had excellent weeks. Like the pads came on, those two flashed, especially Ennis. He had the first interception in a team period. Even last week, he like punched out a ball, forced fumble. So you see his physicality pop. So I'm excited to watch those guys in New York and see how they perform against those receivers. Not that there's much outside of Neighbors, but you know.
No, they needed Neighbors for sure.
They needed a little more, yeah. Jalen Hyatt, you know, he's there.
That's true. That's another good one.
Yep. Hendon, I want to see Hendon a little bit more because he's had some up and down days.
Yeah.
As we tend to know with him.
He has.
And that is a legitimate competition for the backup spot. And at this point, I will say I would be surprised if they don't enter the season with all three quarterbacks there. I think Nate is going to make the roster. Could even be the number 2 to start the year.
Yep.
Because Hendon has kind of left that door open. And, you know, as much as you would probably like for him to shut it, he's just not there yet. And that's okay. Right. He's still got some time. These players develop on their own pace, as we've seen. We just talked about Barnes and Iffy and Levi. So it might take some more time. And that's okay. But I do want to see Hendon perform. I am going to be at the preseason game. I imagine Hendon will get the start and a ton of reps. So not only joint practice, but also that game. I'd like to see how he performs. So yeah, I think that's probably where I'd start. What about you?
Yeah, Hendon is the one. I'm really happy you're going to be there at those practices because this is a huge week for him. Bigger than anybody on the team, I think, in some ways, because like I was watching him last week and I completely agree with you. Like it's a lot of the stuff that we saw in the spring is popping back up now. And I know there were accuracy issues in the spring, but that really wasn't. Did Justin Rogers write that he broke his thumb or something happened like that?
Yeah, and he had like a little thing on his finger in spring, so we kind of already knew that.
So I get that, but the bigger concern was that he wasn't getting rid of the ball and he wasn't making his reads, he wasn't seeing everything, and he was kind of panicky. And I was watching him there the other day, Monday, and I'm thinking to myself, like, he's doing the same thing to a degree. Like, he's scrambling a lot, and the defensive guys are like, stop running, and what are you doing? Like, he's like, what do you want me to do? I'm getting sacked or whatever, you know? But it's like, I almost wonder if at this point, it's been a full year of sitting out and just practicing here with these guys. He didn't get to do any of the stuff with even this preseason stuff last year. Like, he has not played against another team in 3 years, 2 years, whatever it's been, darn near. And I almost wonder if like he's just so deep into his own brain that he needs to go out there and play against another team in a game where the other team also has to think about making mistakes too. And then, you know, we'll see what happens. Like, because I really do think, as rough as it has looked for him, and it's not been great. I really do think that if he gets out there and just gets into a groove again, right, playing, and they're going to give him a lot of reps, you would imagine that maybe some of that stuff will rust off, and maybe some of that stuff will go away. So that's the hope. The negative side of that, or the thing that you don't want, is Hendon Hooker a quarterback that never threw an interception in college because he never threw a risky pass, because he never threw a ball that ever could have been challenged? Because that's possible. He played an offense that, remember, stretches the windows, makes sure, with the big stacks. So, that's where we're at right now with Hendon Hooker, where it's like huge week, because I really like him. And I think he is more than just the guy that offense made look really good. But like, unique situation with the context, we do have to see him go out and do something here. It's a big, big week for him. I feel like maybe than anybody else on the team. Huge week for him, because you're right. I don't think that they would have I don't think they love the fact that Sudfeld is playing better than him. I don't think that's what they want here, at this point.
No, that's not ideal.
No,
I would say
not ideal.
But
no offense to Nate.
No offense to Nate.
Yeah, right.
I will say, at this point, the first week and a half of camp last year, Nate looked awesome too. And then the wheels fell right off that track.
That is really true.
Right off, and they called up Teddy and said, "How fast can you get here, brother?"
That is very true. Yes,
we will see. I think it was at joint practice against
it was
the Giants
during this time because and that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? It's like Nate Sudfeld knows how to practice. He knows what's going on out here, right? Like he knows that if he's going to stand in there with guys blitzing him, they're not going to hit him. He doesn't have to run out of there. A lot of what's going on with Hendon right now is a rookie. He's a rookie, and he's 26 or whatever the hell he is, but he's a rookie, and he's going
that's
through
the part that trips people
rookie
up.
things. Right.
Because he's 26, but guys, he came from a system that does not really translate to the NFL.
Not at all.
And so I would almost look at him like he's 22 because that's and he's 22 in terms of like
with
NFL
the injury
experience and whatnot. So it's like the injury set him back. He's learning a modern NFL offense. And that's taken some time. And like I think you would want him to be ready by year 2, but this is almost 100%. Like year 1 for him.
It is year 1.
So
for him.
you have to kind of treat it like that. And I think that's okay. In the meantime, I think you hope he gets there by the end of the season. But right now, if he's not, and Jared's also been very durable. So like this
that's
that
true.
might not even matter at all.
Good. Yeah.
So like if Nate has to step in for a game, hopefully you can win that and weather the storm if he comes back. I think if it's a long-term thing, you try to get Hendon ready to take over for a 5-game stretch. But again, these are scenarios that we might even have to talk about.
Right. We'll see. I don't want to make any predictions because it has been up and down, and you never know where the guy's been out that long. But my gut says he's going to be better at the end of preseason than he is right now. He was good in spring with the rookies when they were just doing bullshit, whatever that everybody does. Everything was fine. And then when they started doing install in the summer, it slowed down. And so I feel like that's just natural. That's just like what you would expect. Jared Goff's first training camp here was a disaster. He didn't know what was going on because he's learning the offense, right? So I think that's part of it too. That's got to be a big part of it. But I'm very excited to watch him not only hear the reports back from practice, but because they haven't said, but I would assume that he'll get a good chunk here in this game, right? I mean, I would assume against all of them. I mean,
like, what do you need to see from Nate in a game like this, right? Like,
no, I don't think you need to see anything from Nate. Right?
No, he'll play just because I don't think they want him to get all of it. But like, this should be Hendon's game for sure.
Yeah, Goff will not take any snaps, I would imagine, and then Hendon.
I'd be shocked.
I would start Hendon and let him just play until you want to until they get the scrappy guys in there trying to hurt somebody, and then Sudfeld can go and finish it up or whatever. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. You got anything else this week before we got here?
A couple notes. John Kaminsky had a right knee injury, and he's going to miss some time. It sounds like he's going to miss most of the season. But Dan Campbell left open the possibility that he returns for the playoffs.
Could be late.
I will say, like, Kaminsky has kind of been bumped down a little bit, getting second and third team reps in practice.
Hey, that's not the worst thing. No offense to the commish.
No,
a big fan of his, but that's not the worst thing.
I would say, like, they kind of restructured his contract to save some money there. I thought he might have been a candidate to get cut because they have some guys that like a little bit more. Levi's taking that step up.
More talented guys are playing better. Yeah,
Matthew Betts can play some inside, some edge, and some Sam linebacker. So like they have some guys that they like and are trying out. And so he was kind of getting second and third team reps before this injury. So I do want to put that out there. It's a loss, obviously, because what he means to that locker room and just like his work ethic and how he goes about his business. I think that's all stuff that you want. But I will say from a football aspect, like there were other guys that were kind of repping at least on the same level or above. So there's that. And they fly out to New York sometime this weekend, and we'll be back next week with some insight. Monday and Tuesday, I think, are joint practices, and they're off Wednesday, game Thursday. So that'll be fun. I'm excited.
There we go. All right, I think that'll do it for this week. Once again, thank you, as always, to everyone who has ever listened to this show on this iTunes feed. As this is the last episode on here, be sure to follow Colton and I on Twitter. I'm at Nick Baumgardner. Colton, are you Colton _Pouncy or something?
Yes, sir. Colton
_Pouncy. Easy enough. So we'll have all the details on there. You can get at Chris too when the time is right. Probably in that second week, maybe mid-August. So it won't be long. We won't be away from you for too long, but we'll be away for a couple weeks here as we repackage this whole deal. But yes, thanks again to everyone for listening. Shout out to The Athletic, I guess, for hosting all these shows and still employing us because that's still happening. Yeah. Thanks again for Colton, I'm Nick, and for Chris. We'll talk to you soon. That'll work.
Okay, no sad.